Hey, welcome back to Roaring Tiger's Garage. It's Ryan here. I've had some uneven pad wear on my rotors, and I've noticed the calipers are not releasing like they should be. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the calipers off and rebuild them. And while I'm at it, I'm going to repaint them so they look real nice. So the first thing we need to do to remove the caliper is to open this little latch. I call it the trap door. We're working in my personal garage. We are not in the nice fancy Roaring Tiger's garage, so bear with me, folks. So that I don't have a caliper spreader because I'm not in the actual shop. So what I'm going to do is actually pry. I'll start with this one. Pry the calipers open. Yes, it's going to mar up the finish, but I'm getting ready to repaint them, so no worries here. Okay, so I've pulled the pads out. I've closed the trap door, and I'm on the caliper bolts now. These are 10mm Allen. They're pretty tight, so I'm going to show you guys a trick. If you don't have a breaker bar, you can kind of do what I'm doing. I'm sliding a 19 open socket, and I'm just pulling on it and using it sort of like a breaker bar. Seems to be working. So one down. Let's see if I can muscle this one off. And here we go. Okay, so I've removed the lower caliper bolt and the brake line. That's an 11mm open wrench, and this one's free, so the caliper comes off just like that. Okay, guys? And then I've pre-positioned a solo cup and some newspaper to catch the brake fluid. We're at the rear of the vehicle working on the rear calipers. Same thing applies. Drop the trap door down, spread the pads apart, pull the pads out. Where it is different is the caliper bolts are different. They're actually a 19mm bolt, and they're on pretty tight, so I'm using an impact. I've got it positioned, and that's really the only way to bust them loose that I found, unless you have a breaker bar, which I don't think you could even get it back here. So I wanted to show you guys that. I hope you find that helpful. Okay, so we have the calipers off, and we are just checking to see if the pistons have any corrosion, any signs of wear, maybe some pitting. And this is the method we're using. So I bought these bar clamps at Northern Tool, and basically we're just using them to keep the other 3 pistons compressed while we release one at a time and check each bore and piston one at a time. And we are finding a lot of corrosion and buildup. The dust boots seem to be fine, the seals seem to be fine. The car did sit for a while, so they are pretty seized, and it does take quite a bit of air for them to come out. We're going to show you right now the process. And we've got a towel in there. They come out with some force. We have a towel in there to prevent the piston from marring itself on the way out. That's how you do it.
Alright, so we got the piston popped out. Going to clean it up with a little brake cleaner. You can see when you wet it up, you can see where this debris, residue, that's going to cause that piston to stay dry, not move smoothly, might cause it to drag. Getting all that off of there. There's some aftermarket paint on this one. We're going to take a razor blade, scrape that off just to ensure that there's nothing dragging. Alright folks, we've cleaned this brake piston out. It's nice and clean. Wasn't in too bad a shape, just needed some cleaning. Also, we cleaned and inspected the seal, dust cover and seal. This end's the dust cover, this side works as a seal. It recesses, sits in that housing. We went ahead and cleaned that housing just in case there was any residue that would cause this piston not to travel freely. We'll pop the seal back on. It just goes into that neck there. Inspect it, make sure it's all nice and even. Looks even, travels smoothly. I'll go ahead and put this back in now. After they get clean, they usually travel in pretty good. They can go in a little crooked, little cattywampus. But if they go in nice and even, they usually just slide right in. See how this one's lining up. See how they kind of walk around a little bit. Went right in, nice and clean, good indication.
Okay, so we're to the final step in our project where we're gonna go ahead and repaint and recondition the brake calipers on the 944 Turbo. So what I'm doing right now is I'm basically prepping them for paint. I bought a little paint stripper tool that goes on the end of a drill, and it's basically taking it all the way to metal. And some people are like, oh, why are you going to metal? It's because a smooth surface is a shiny surface. One thing you should keep in mind is to wear some type of respirator and eye protection. This will throw metal shavings up, and it does make a pretty big mess. That's why I'm on the back porch. So we just finished repainting the calipers, and the main reason I wanted to do this was because I'd never got a chance to do it before, and I had quotes from shops anywhere from $700 on the low end all the way up to $2,000. So I figured I would take it on by myself. It is very labor intensive, and I do see why they charge so much now. All of the paint and primer and clear coat, I think the total for everything, including sandpaper, was about $70. You need one can of primer and 2 cans of red caliper paint and 1 can of clear coat. And then I used a sanding wheel attached to a drill to sand them down to bare metal. That is why they turned out so shiny. I removed basically all the layers of aftermarket paint, factory paint, and they look really good. They look much better in person than on camera. And some of you are asking, how did you get these results? So I'm going to explain the method behind what I did. So I sanded them down to bare metal with a sanding wheel attached to a corded drill. That took a while. That was a good hour of caliper and prep work. And when I say prep work, I'm talking about sanding it down, taping off all the rubber, the piston areas, basically all the important areas. Taping it off took a long time, an hour of caliper. Then from there, I did 3 coats of primer, top and bottom. I had these sitting on the floor. I did not have a spray rack where you could do it all in one spray, so literally I had to do 3 coats on the top, flip it over, 3 coats on the bottom. If you're doing that, I recommend don't use cardboard because it's going to stick to it and you'll never get it out of the finish. Use some type of polyurethane box cover like what you would see in a Walmart or a Target, those little tote boxes. It's great for that. Just buy 2 lids, that's plenty. So from there, I did 5 coats of red caliper paint on the top, 3 coats of red caliper paint on the bottom. Let it dry for about 3 hours, and then I went over it with the clear. I did 4 coats. Okay, so we have the calipers fully repainted. They're ready to go back on the car. But before we do that, since I've had some uneven pad wear, you can see the rotors have 2 options. 1, I can replace them, or 2, I can go and have them turned with a rotor lathe, and I think I'm going to opt for the second one. These are fairly new rotors. There's hardly any wear on them, so I'm just going to run to O'Reilly's and have them turned, and they should be fine. I'm going to show you guys how to remove these. I'm going to use my new screwdriver that my mother-in-law gave me for Christmas. Pay attention, these are not on very tight, and they should not be on that tight. You don't want them to seize on you. Remember, all they're for is to hold the rotor to the hub and allow you to put the caliper on without it moving around. So keep that in mind. Alright guys, that's how you remove your rotor. Hey, we just got back from O'Reilly's. Mark did a great job turning the rotors. We're going to go ahead and reinstall them. Not too tight, guys, just snug. Just like that. So now it's time to reinstall the calipers to the car. I'm gonna start with the rear. These can be a little tricky. There's a washer that actually goes in between the caliper and the hub. So you wanna make sure you do that. And the reason why is if you don't, your lug nuts won't go in far enough. Okay, so I've got my bolts started. I'm threading caliper bolts in by hand. Before you get ahead of yourself, sometimes you need it to be kind of loose to work in the brake feed line. There we go. You need an 11mm wrench. She's going in nicely. Guys, I can't tell you how good these calipers look on the car. Changes the whole look, man. It's worth the time. So not too tight on the brake lines, just kind of snug. They weren't tight to begin with. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my 19 and finish hand tightening these. Caliper is reinstalled on the vehicle. Let's pop our pads in. Okay, brake pads are fully installed. Make sure they're all the way down and fully seated. Close your trap door. Get your channel locks. Compress it with your channel locks. And push in and let it up. And there you have it. That's how you reinstall calipers, pads on a 944 turbo on the rear. Stay tuned for the front. Gonna go ahead and reinstall the front brake calipers now. We already did the rear. So this is how you do the front. Get your top bolt started. It'll make it a lot easier to do the rear. Just kind of feel for it. Good. So they're both in. Before you get them too tight, go ahead and position your brake line. Go back in. So the brake lines are tight. I'm gonna go ahead and start snugging down the caliper bolts. Torque these down to 60 foot-pounds. We're ready to install our brake pads, so we're gonna pop our pads in. Make sure they're all the way seated. Just like that. Close your trap door. Press. And push in, just like that.
Reinstalling the calipers and the brake pads, we have to bleed the brakes, get all the air out of the system. We have filled the brake fluid reservoir up front all the way to the brim, and we have pressurized it using a motif bleeder. We're starting here at the right rear, and we will proceed to the left rear, right front, and then ultimately the left front. What we're doing here, as you can see, there is an inside and an outside bleed nipple. We're going to connect this little catch bottle with a silicone hose, and then we're going to break the we're going to loosen the bleed nipple. As you can see, there's a lot of air spewing out. and as the brake fluid fills, as the caliper fills with brake fluid, you will see that there's no longer air coming out.
We hope this video was helpful in you performing maintenance on your own cars. We know that you're as passionate about your Porsches as we are.
If you found this video helpful, please give us a thumbs up. And if you like us and what we're doing, subscribe to Roaring Tiger's Garage.